Hey everyone. So the paper that I submitted to the CogPI workshop, the Cognitive Personal Informatics workshop, was really a summary of how I'm feeling about a certain type of conceptual or concept/theory that's used in the HCI community and how it's kind of being not treated rigorously yet. We've kind of reached a norm where it's not treated rigorously, which I think is something I wanted to shake up a little bit. To see if we could get the community formalizing what they were doing. So my name is Max Wilson, and I've been studying mental workload for about 10 years now as sort of cognitive effort or cognitive load, whatever we're going to call it. And that's basically the problem that we're dealing with. So I've been interested in understanding people's experiences through taking brain measurements in some lab studies or just talking to people and understanding how they're managing that type of effort. So the thing I did myself at first, which I think is what everyone does, is they kind of hear about cognitive load theory and they go, oh, cognitive load theory, and that's great. How do we measure cognitive load theory? Everyone else seems to be using NASA TLX to do that. And that then suddenly I realized later, after talking to people who have been studying cognitive ergonomics and people who have been studying human factors, is to understand that actually there's a different approach to it as well, a different conceptualization of it, and that's mental workload, which is part of workload more generally. And NASA TLX as a measurement comes from that engineering workload background. And cognitive load theory actually comes from something else, which is in educational psychology, and it's about the effort involved in learning from materials. And so we've got this strange dichotomy now, and that is that the kind of main thing people cite when they're talking about why they're thinking of studying cognitive effort, whatever mental effort, they then refer to cognitive load theory, and then they say things like there's the mental effort involved in doing the task, and then there's the mental effort involved in using the materials to help you do the task, and then there's the mental effort involved in turning that into learning. So that has three components. That's where it comes from, the kind of educational psychology side. Whereas, and the way that they measure that most often, by the way, is through a kind of 7-point rating scale. Well, what is your cognitive load? And there's lots of publications about that's how cognitive load theory people measure cognitive load, is just through a kind of Likert scale, basically. But the HCI community seems to then switch, say, oh, let's use NASA TLX, which is like a multi-dimensional, has like 6 dimensions way of assessing overall workload, including physical workload. And that comes from an engineering and cognitive science backgrounds in terms of understanding dual processing theory and things like that. And multiple resources theory, like all of these ways about how the brain processes information, can handle certain amounts of information, and what you can do in parallel and what you can't do in parallel. That all comes from that kind of background. And then so mental workload is somehow one dimension of general workload, which is captured by parts of NASA TLX. But then there's some parts of NASA TLX which are not mental workload, they're physical workload and frustration, and there's temporal workloads. So what we end up doing sometimes is either using NASA TLX as it is and showing that the combined multiple factors lead us to a significant difference in the measurements, or people say, well, we've just taken 2 or 3 dimensions of NASA TLX and the change is significant in those dimensions, which is not really how NASA TLX was first built. And so we end up kind of sampling or sort of sub-using measures in order to measure what we want to measure in HCI. So we're in this point now, and there's a really great review article that Thomas Koch and his colleagues produced recently, which goes really into all the ways that, let's say, mental effort or cognitive load or mental workload have been used in our community. And they do highlight in there partly this is kind of like a variation that we're dealing with. But what they have in their paper and what's easy to find if you search Google Scholar is that there's also a bunch of less formalized words being used, like cognitive effort or mental load. And sometimes people use those when they mean one of the more formalized theories. What I would like to see, one thing I'd like to see in the research community is that people start to say, I'm basing the design of this experiment, or my hypotheses are based on mental workload theory, and then we use NASA TLX to measure it, and that all lines up. Or we based it on cognitive load theory, and we used what's the standard for measuring cognitive load theory, what's been published there, because that was what was relevant. And that we start to formalize rather than kind of generalize or mess up all these terms. And then hopefully that will increase the rigor behind the research in this area, especially as we're getting more and more tools that will allow us to measure or allow more people to measure things, even if they don't have advanced scientific equipment. We're starting to see consumer devices come through. So that's what my paper is about. And I'm looking forward to discussing that type of thing with other people at the workshop if we get a chance. And look forward to seeing you there.